Guys, before I get started with today's lesson, we're going to continue on with the Reformation today. We're going to be looking at the Catholic Reform today. Oh, you got it.
I didn't know this had to be signed. It was on that app, but I already had the thing, so I didn't even look at it.
Perfect. Thank you. I just want to make sure it gets all on. Thank you. Sure. Guys, what I want to talk to you about a little bit here. If you're interested in doing this, let's see, we're missing Mr. Hatch today. And who are we missing here? Maria, missing Maria. I just kind of want to throw this out as a possibility for some of you. We are looking at piloting this summer that internship program. And if any of you are interested in doing an internship in a career field, please let me know. And I'm going to pass this around. And what this basically is, I need your name, what type of internship you would be interested in, and whether you'd rather do this in June or July, if you're interested. Of course, don't feel like you have, this is not a requirement. However, the internship is going to ultimately be part of an honors program with graduation, potentially. The other part of this is I think it's just generally good for you to get some work experience in a field that you think you'd like. Because you may go and you may do it, you may think, boy, I want to be a nurse, and then you go and you're like, I cannot stand blood. You probably don't want to be a nurse. Or I think I want to be in construction, and then you go out there and you're like, man, I hate this, it's cold. So it's good to just, it's good to get some experience doing that. How this is going to work is that there's going to be like in summer school, we're going to have basically like 5 or 6 days of summer school where it's soft skills basically. You'll come in and there'll be some employability skills that you have to do. It's pass-fail kind of course. It's called micro-internship. And so you'll be here in a morning or an afternoon setting for like the first week of summer school. Then after that, we'll place you in an internship, and the rest of the course, there'll be a few requirements. And the requirements are more like reflections on the things that you've done. But that'll be 30 clock hours, and the school's responsibility is to follow up and make sure that that you go there, talk to the employer, and get some feedback and reflection from you. This isn't like a big stress, we're going to have a big 50-page paper that you have to write on this experience or anything. I mean, the reflection is probably going to be more like a 3-minute YouTube video that you make. But at the same time, we want people who will take this seriously, because, this ultimately is about you and your future, not about us. And so you may decide, you may want to go and someplace, let's say that you're interested in performing arts. You may schedule an internship at some place like Fox Theater, or we may help you with that process. You may be interested in construction. We might put you in with a local construction company like, I don't know, Brock Miller or some other corporation that does that. You may be interested in healthcare. If you're interested in optometry, we might place you with a local optometrist, or whatever the case may be. We'll try to place you as best we possibly can. So I'm going to pass around this document. If any of you in here are interested in doing this, I think you guys have seen this already. But please sign up for it. If you're not, that's okay too. But I think this is a program that could help you kind of figure out what's good for your future. A lot of times here, I think we've been pretty decent at this school preparing you for college, But, ultimately, the goal isn't college, because everyone who goes to college is then hopefully going to get a job. And it might be helpful to know what you want to major in before you go. I always find that students pick jobs that either they know of because their parents do it, or close friends and relatives, or they see that it pays a lot. I can't tell you how many folks that I know who have gone into things like chemical engineering, and then they get to Rolla and then they just hate it and change to something else, and they're a business major. Why do they pick chemical engineering? Because it's one of the highest paid undergraduate jobs that are out there. Okay? So, I think this could be helpful for you. All right. Yesterday we talked about Martin Luther a little bit. And do you have any questions on Luther and Luther's contributions? Any questions about Luther and Luther's contributions? By the way, I will have your reflections that you wrote on Wednesday back to you on Monday. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the Catholic Reform, the Catholic Reformation. Looking in here, the older, more antiquated term was the Counter-Reformation. But I would really rather call this the Catholic Reformation, because the Catholic Church actually reforms itself. I think Counter-Reformation means that the Catholic Church was against reform. And no, they weren't. That's why the Catholic Church doesn't sell church offices today like simony. This is why the Catholic Church doesn't do indulgences. It's been 500 years. And there had been a long-term movement in the Catholic Church to fix some of the abuses. And that was led by Erasmus and other Christian humanists. And if you recall, what did Christian humanists want to do? What was their goal? To reform the church from within. Exactly, Abby. Reform the church from within. And Erasmus, as you recall from yesterday, hopefully, Erasmus told Luther, man, you can't leave the church, because if you do, what's going to happen? Christianity is going to be like, if I drop this mug on this tile floor, if I dropped it, what would happen to it? Shatter into a million little pieces, and we just can't have that. So Erasmus and others are going to stay within the church. And the real reform movement in the Catholic Church took place at the Council of Trent, which was on again, off again for the better part of 20 years. Now Erasmus was deceased by that point, but a lot of Erasmus's ideas became very influential. And let's kind of go through what the Council of Trent, and Council of Trent was an ecumenical or church-wide council. It wasn't just the Pope saying this is what it's going to be. It was leaders from within the Catholic Church meeting over a period of 2 decades to answer Luther and other Protestants' criticisms and fix problems that had been boiling for 400 or 500 years. First issue they dealt with was tradition and Scripture. Now, if you remember, what did Luther and the Protestants say? What's the only basis for church authority? Primary source. And Cody, what's the primary source that Luther said you got to use? The Bible. Everything's got to come from the Bible. Well, the Catholic Church said, hold on. We love the Bible too. But we need to allow for church doctrine as well. Church tradition. Why? Because the Bible was written a long time ago, in the 1st century. It doesn't mention contemporary issues. We've got to have a way of updating and dealing with issues as they arise. Otherwise, the religion is just a historical religion. So they say Scripture's good, but we're adding church tradition and teaching. Okay, does that make sense? And the Catholic Church still follows that idea. Second, they are going to reaffirm the idea of Thomas Aquinas. Remember, for Luther and the Protestant, what was more important? Faith or works? Faith. For Luther and the Protestants, it's almost exclusively faith. What the Catholic Reform is going to do is the Catholic Reform is going to say, no. Thomas Aquinas was correct when he developed the medieval synthesis. And of course, Thomas Aquinas was a great medieval Catholic theologian and philosopher, author of Summa Theologica, among other things, and a scholastic philosopher. If you recall, what did Thomas Aquinas in his medieval synthesis say were the two ways that you could know truth? What were the two ways you could know truth?
Do you live by your senses?
Through observing the world, yes. Or through what?
Revelation.
Or through revelation. So you could know God through divine revelation, or basically through your senses. Science, if you will. You know, and you think about it, a lot of times in religious circles, science and faith are kind of like put as two ends of the spectrum and they're always in conflict. What Aquinas said is there are two ways to know God. Now, Aquinas said the reason you can know God through science or using your senses is because who created the world? God. And so if God created the world, you can look at the world, study the world, and know about God because He's the creator of the world. So science and faith aren't inherently opposed. And folks, that's why you see some pretty famous Catholic universities, like Notre Dame, and particularly in St. Louis University, involved in science. The Human Genome Project. SLU was heavily involved with that, where you don't see places like Missouri Baptist, which still stick to that more Luther idea that faith is the only way. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, sacramental system. Remember, the Protestants largely had attacked the sacramental system. And do we remember what the sacraments were?
Yeah.
What's a sacrament?
Baptism, communion, confirmation, marriage, holy orders. Yeah, holy orders. That's right.
Baptism. Yeah. These are things that you do, works that you do to get closer to God. Very good. Now, one of the reasons why the Protestants rejected sacraments is they believed that there was no intercessor or go-between between man and God. The church did not act as this go-between. However, the other part of this is that Protestants said that mankind or humankind was basically flawed. So you weren't good enough to do good works to earn your salvation. The church, the Catholic Church and the Council of Trent said, no, we still affirm kind of this potential for good that people have, probity of the will, but we also believe that there are actions that you need to do. It matters not just what you believe, but it matters what you do. The church is a go-between between man and God. The church is something that, and there are actions that you need to do. Okay? So they affirm the sacramental system. They did look at Luther and the other Protestants who complained about simony and clerical ignorance. Now, do we remember what simony and clerical ignorance are? Simony is the purchase of what? It's the purchasing of church offices. So, what that was talking about, Luther would say you shouldn't be able to buy church offices. Secondly, if you're going to be a priest, you should be trained in knowing what the church is. A lot of times, if you remember with simony, people would buy the offices or have the offices bought for them, and would they know anything? No. So now, if you want to be a priest, you can't buy the office, and you have to go to seminary. And what exactly is seminary?
Is it like school to learn how to be a priest?
Yeah, it's like college to be a priest.
Do they still have that?
They sure do. And if you want to be a priest today in the Catholic Church, you have to go to seminary. In fact, I think the church today is kind of really trying to recruit young folks to go, that they'll even give you tuition waivers if you'll go to study to become a priest. They they rejected, the Council of Trent did away with indulgences, so everything we talked about that angered Luther with indulgences is no more after 1563. No more indulgences. All gone away. Catholic Reform, the Catholic Reformation also affirmed intercession. That is, the church, remember my example of the tube, the church is going to remain that go-between. So, from the Catholic perspective, do I need to attend church and receive the sacraments? Or can I achieve salvation outside of the church? You've got to be in the church. And they're also going to affirm marriage as a sacrament. Because the Protestants said no, it's just a contract between a man and a woman. Okay? But the Catholic Church is going to change that a bit. I mean, they're not going to change it, rather, I'm sorry, they are going to affirm the sacramental status of it. Right. Another thing that's going to happen with Catholic Reform, and this is a big, big area, is there's going to be a new order that is developed called the Jesuits. And its founder is Ignatius of Loyola. Okay? Ignatius of Loyola. Ignatius of Loyola is going to found something called the Jesuits. Its official name is the Society of Jesus. And let's spend a little time talking about why they were so important with Catholic Reform. Ignatius of Loyola, their founder, was very unlikely to be a religious dude. He was a Spaniard by birth and was a military guy. So one day he was fighting in a battle of Pamplona, and a cannonball grazed his leg, basically leaving him to convalesce for over a year at his family castle. And while he was in there, he only had a couple of books to read. One of those books was The Lives of the Saints, and the other was The Imitation of Christ. So while he was there, he kept reading about the lives of these saints and how they did miraculous things and how awesome they were. And he had this idea. His idea was, I want to form a new religious order, and I want that, and a religious order within the Catholic Church, a new order of Catholic priests, and what we're going to be focused on more than anything else is education and missionary work. Education and missionary work. But we're going to do it with a twist. What was his background? What was he in before he got hurt? Military. It's going to be organized like an army's organized, which means there's a clear chain of command. Okay? And so he's going to be the first Secretary General of this. And it's organized almost like a military. And who does it report to? The Pope at the very top. You might say, well, that doesn't sound strange. Well, here's the thing. Every other Catholic order, say if I were stationed in St. Louis and I were a Franciscan, I would have my Franciscan superior, but who would I also have to report to? The Archbishop of St. Louis, because he's head of the diocese in which I'm stationed. If you are a Jesuit, who do you report to? Your superior, and your superior goes to the Pope. So what if you're in St. Louis and you're a Jesuit, and you say, I don't want to listen to the local archbishop. You have to listen to the local archbishop? No. Which means that they can do reform a lot faster because they don't have to deal with local politics. It also means that they may get pretty upset and they may anger local political entities too. Does anyone else need this? Good? Okay. So, Ignatius is going to organize the Society of Jesus. And what does the Society of Jesus do? By the way, the name Jesuits literally in Latin means little Jesuses. And other Catholic monks, other orders were trying to make fun of them and said, oh, you just think you're little Jesuses. Little Jesuses. And Ignatius was like, yeah, That's what we're going to call ourselves. We're the little Jesuses, because we're doing teaching and education work. So what do you think about that? So, Ignatius and his initial band of 7 Spanish priests end up expanding. And 100 years later, they have over 500 universities founded in Europe. And today, there are about 5 times that number of Jesuit institutions.
I've never heard of it.
You ever heard of Jesuits before? Have you heard of St. Louis University? That's a Jesuit. Pope Francis is a Jesuit. Ever heard of Georgetown University? That's a Jesuit university.
I guess it's just
The University of Rome, Jesuit university. Okay? University of Loyola. You ever Chicago? That's Jesuit. Anytime you see Loyola, University of Loyola, guess what? That's going to be a Jesuit institution named after its founder. Okay? There are a ton of them everywhere. Now I will tell you, one of the sad things for me as a SLU graduate is that the first 200 years of the Jesuit order, all education was free. Free. Was born in the wrong time in the wrong era. Now, what the Jesuits would do, and they had basically from kindergarten all the way through college, university, and graduate school. And one of my professors at SLU, one of the guys on my committee was Father Matthew Maher. He was a Jesuit priest. And he had taught everything from first grade to graduate studies throughout his career at Jesuit institutions. He was a brilliant guy. He now is on staff at the University of Florence in Italy. But one of the things about the Jesuits is they would only take, and the reason their reputation as a school, as educators grew, is that they would only take the best and the brightest. Didn't matter if you were rich, didn't matter if you were poor. If you literally were living in a van down by the river, you were dirt poor, or in this case maybe a chariot down by the river, because I guess they wouldn't have had vans back then, you could go for free. But what if you lived in a van down by the river and you were the village idiot?
Well, no, sorry.
Okay, what if you were wealthy, but you were also the village idiot? So, no. So you had to be pretty bright to get in. But you could rise from nothing to the top. And so that was pretty important. So they had great schools, and they went basically everywhere. They were also missionaries, and their missionary style was a ton different than virtually every other Catholic order. In an American history course at some point, you've probably studied at some point about how the Spanish New World or New Spain treated Native American peoples. How did they tend to treat Native American peoples? Not very well. They were like, convert or die. The Jesuits were a ton different. They weren't like the Franciscans or the Dominicans who would basically march in with a cross, speaking Latin or Spanish, and say, convert, follow Jesus, understand the Trinity, or die. What the Jesuits would do is they would march, they would walk into a village. They would live with their native peoples for a couple of years, learning their language, maybe teaching them a song or two on a flute, trading with them a little bit, earning their trust, and then after 2 or 3 years, what would they do? They would try to convert them. They wouldn't kill them then. They were much more, and they would try to relate Christianity to the culture that they knew.
If they said no, would they just be, okay, or would they still keep trying
They would keep trying
until they succeeded?
until they succeeded, but they usually didn't use violence.
That's good.
Whereas
Right.
other groups,
The people who knock on your door like,
Yes.
every weekend. You ready yet?
now,
They were terrifying.
and so really the Jesuits were used basically to help institute Catholic reform. They were used not only for education and missionary work in the New World, they even went to Asia. One of my favorite Jesuits in history was a dude by the name of Matteo Ricci. No. Spelled differently. Matteo Ricci.
Is that an H or a T?
That's two T's. Matteo Ricci. If it were English, it would be Matt Richard. This is Italiano. Anyway, Matteo Ricci. He was a missionary to China in the early modern period. And he went to China, and while he was in China, he was trying to do this accommodation conversion process, slowly learn the culture, immerse yourself in it. And he was looking at China, and he was like, how can I get Chinese middle-class folks to listen to me? So this is what he did. China, long before we did this in the West, had instituted a civil service exam. That is, if you wanted to work for the government, the bureaucracy in China, you had to pass a competency test. Think of it like kind of like the big ACT for China 500 years ago. Okay? So what he did was develop a test service program, a test prep program. Yeah. And he would recruit Chinese middle-class kids, and his whole system was developing a memory palace. Did you guys ever watch Sherlock on BBC? That character always would do mind palace things, that didn't matter. And he basically helped them study for this test. And after he helped them and they were successful, why then he would start trying to preach Christianity to them. And so the Jesuits, they went to India, they went to China, they went to the New World, North and South America. They even went into Protestant countries to the north. If you go to the SLU Library, which is a Jesuit school, and even though I'm not Catholic, I am a graduate of St. Louis University. That's where I got my PhD. And when I graduated there, the ceremony was really pretty cool. If you get a doctoral degree, which I'm sure many of you will in here because you're all bright people, and it may not be hopefully it won't be in history because you'll want jobs. But it's true, I know. I'm not encouraging you. You need to get a degree in something where you can actually eat. That's a good thing. But you go and you get hooded. That is, you walk up there. It's almost like being knighted.
Not at school. They just send out an email saying you can't work at the school.
And well, I know this is a different kind of hood. And so you walk up on stage. You bend down on your knee, genuflect, if you will, to use a fancy term, in front of your advisor, and they put the doctoral hood on you. And then the president of the school says your name, and then you walk off. It's a lot cooler than high school graduation. But what happened is the president of SLU at the time was a Jesuit by the name of Lawrence Biondi. And after everyone would get this, they would say, now you are a son, if you're a male, or daughter, if you're female, of St. Louis University forever. And then you walk off the stage. My point here is that the Jesuits are still incredibly active in education.